Imagine you got selected for jury duty and you got put on the case, and the case brings out a cassette for evidence, and it's the most graphic, disturbing, horrifying audio and screams you've ever heard in your life. The audio was so bad and terrifying that they actually offered you free therapy after the trial. Well, this is not a movie, this is real life, and this is what happened during the trial of the Toolbox Killers. The two men that turned their van into a torture chamber. Everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Danielle, and welcome back to my channel, or hi if you're new. I cover different true crime cases that happen around the same time that I release the video. So I'm going to be releasing this in June, so we're going to be talking about a true crime case that happened historically in June. I also post shorts on my channel where I go visit haunted, ghostly, abandoned places, so if you want to check out those shorts, go ahead. If anything sounds interesting to you, please make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an upload. So today we are going to be talking about a true crime case that happened in the month of June historically back in the 1970s. It was a terrifying duo, two men that turned their van into a torture chamber. So let's introduce these two monsters. We have Roy Norris and Lawrence Bittaker. Firstly, I'm going to be talking to you about Lawrence. Lawrence was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was born September 27th, 1940, making him a Libra. He had a rough childhood. He was abandoned by his birth mother. He was put up for adoption. His adoptive parents had the last name Bittaker. His father, George Bittaker, worked in aviation, so they did move around a lot. They moved from Florida to Ohio to eventually California, where the main crimes would occur. Bittaker had a deep-set, just emotional disturbance in him because of the fact that his mom abandoned him as a child. He always said that he believes if he had one good parent, that he wouldn't have did any of this bad stuff, which I don't believe. I just think maybe if you weren't crazy, you wouldn't have done all this bad stuff. But anyway, I do want to say that I got most of my information and research for this case from the documentary. I believe it's on Netflix called The Toolbox Killers, so check that out if you have time. It was very interesting. You got to hear like original audio clips from Lawrence Bittaker talking and the woman who interviewed him throughout the years, so give that a watch. Lawrence was a very weird child, to say the least. He did do this stereotypical homicidal red flag thing, was to torture and kill animals as a child. But not only did he kill them, he did sadistic things to them. He would remove their teeth, so just the extra mile weirdness, extra mile sadism, even further than just killing animals. He would torture them, and he wanted to cause them pain. He also would sneak into his neighbors' homes in the middle of the night and just move stuff around because he wanted to make them scared. He wanted them to think, who moved my candle, who was in the house, and just be terrified thinking about that, because Bittaker got off on fear. So if others were scared, he liked that. He enjoyed that. So he would do that even from a young child. He was arrested for the first time at age 12. He got arrested for shoplifting. His criminal career did start there, and it only got worse. The crimes only built up worse and worse. And eventually he did end up stabbing someone, which is how he got into prison in the first place. I'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, his adoptive parents ended up disowning him at this point. He dropped out of high school even though he was incredibly smart. But he was just doing all kinds of crimes that they just were so upset with the monster that they raised that they just disowned him and never ended up seeing him again. So he just ended up going down the worst path that he possibly could have, and he grew up to be known as one of the United States' worst, most sadistic serial killers that we've had. Psychologists described Bittaker as not thinking of people as people and thinking them more as objects. He was so quick to just use them, abuse them, and throw them away like they didn't matter. So very scary thought, very unsettling. Roy Norris was born February 5th, 1948 in Greeley, Colorado. He had a rough childhood as well. His mother was a drug addict and an alcoholic. He was repeatedly put into foster care where he was abused in foster care, sexually, physically. He was also neglected in foster care, so he just had the worst possible childhood you can imagine. Not an excuse for what they did by any means at all whatsoever, but I just want to lay out the backstory. As well, he dropped out of high school just like Bittaker, and he moved on to be a criminal. But right after high school, he did join the Navy for a little bit. At the age of 17, he did serve for 4 months in Vietnam. But then as soon as he got home from Vietnam, he was charged with multiple SAs and rapes, just really bad stuff. And he eventually did get discharged from the Navy because they thought he had severe mental issues and a schizoid personality. So he was described as the muscle in the group, whereas Bittaker was more of the brains. Unfortunately, these two monsters did end up meeting each other in prison. As I mentioned, Bittaker was serving time after being convicted of stabbing someone with a deadly weapon. He stabbed a gas station worker in 1974. Norris was in prison for the sexually assaults that he committed. They both met each other in prison, and they both bonded over their sadistic pleasure and just their weirdness and their criminal behavior. They would talk in prison and they would discuss their plans after prison of disgusting criminal behavior that they would do. They were just planning on the new crimes that they would commit together and be even more deadly as a duo. As soon as they got out of prison, they would drive around the beaches and they would just take pictures of just random women that were at the beaches. They would just stalk their prey. So unsettling to even say that, but that's what they were doing. Their first victim was in 1979 when they both got out of prison, and as they were stalking these women, they found their first victim, Cindy Schaefer. They stalked Cindy and they ended up getting her into the van. They tied her up and brought her to the mountains. They took turns essaying her. Cindy was only 16 years old. When asked why Cindy, what was it about her that made you want her to be the victim, he just responded, she was young, pretty, blonde, and alone. She was walking home from church on June 24th, 1979. She was a tutor in high school. She was adored by her friends and her family. She was just an overall sweet person. She was studying foreign language. She wanted to be a foreign language teacher like her mom. She was so young with a bright future ahead of her. And she was literally walking home from church, which is so sad. There's nothing more innocent you can do than be a child walking home from church when such a terrible thing happened. Bittaker, don't want to curse on here, he blames her. He said, what was she doing walking alone, how easy she made it for us. Are you serious? And they did those unspeakable acts to her, and then they realized what now? What do we do with her now? So Norris actually wanted to let her go. He wanted to release her, but it was Bittaker who kind of talked him out of that and was like, she's seen us, she knows our faces, we can't do that. Bittaker explained that they had to end her life, unfortunately. Norris tried to strangle her. He ended up breaking down and crying. He couldn't do it. He went to the side of the road and he actually got sick on the side of the road. And Bittaker had to talk him back up. He grabbed a coat hanger and said, maybe try this. So he did end up trying it again. He tightened it around her neck and he did eventually take her life, sadly, and they just threw her off the mountains and discarded her like trash, which is just so hard to even say. She was only 16 years old, and they just threw her off the mountain like she was nothing, and they just went about their day, and the police did not find her body. Let's talk more about the van that they created. They named the van Murder Mac. It was a silver van that they had equipped with police scanners. They had carpet in the van. They had a full-size mattress and the infamous toolbox that they had under the mattress, where they would use those tools to torture their victims. They also had walkie-talkies to communicate with each other. And they would repeat this pattern with 4 other teenage girls: Andrea Hall, Jackie Gillam, Leah Lamp, and Shirley Ledford. Now, Bittaker explained that the first crime was not satisfying to him. He was a sadist, so there wasn't a lot of torture going on, so he wasn't satisfied. Not trying to downplay at all what happened to Cindy, but compared to the other girls, it was not a sadistic killing. It was still so sad, but the level of sadism just wasn't there in that first crime. And I do want to add a fair warning. It's very disturbing. The next victim was 18, Hall. She's much stronger than Cindy, so it was a struggle to get her sedated and into the van and tied up. With her, they started, unfortunately, experimenting with sadism. Apparently, puncturing the eardrum is one of the most painful things that you can experience, so Bittaker knew that, and his sick mind, he wanted to inflict that on others. So that's what he did. He ruptured her eardrum with an ice pick. He just stabbed her right through the eardrum. And they took sexual pictures of her with the Polaroid camera that they had. Puncturing her in the eardrum with the ice pick did not end her life, so they ended up unaliving her the same way they did with Cindy. They strangled her and tossed her off the mountain. Leah and Jackie were the next victims. They were 13 and 15. They were together at the beach trying to hitchhike. They were friends. They were trying to get a ride down to the beach. And again, Bittaker blames them. He said they were so close to the beach, they should have just walked. Why were they hitchhiking to the beach? Again, blaming literal children. Why were you preying on children? Ever think about that? Okay. They lured them into the van, then they hit them over the head and tied them up. Began trying to escape the van. There were tennis courts to the right of them, so they got their attention. She's screaming, and they ended up subduing her and putting her back into the van. They kind of yelled over to the tennis players. They were like, "She's on an LSD trip. I'm just trying to take her home." Yeah, a 13-year-old. They ended up doing the same pattern. They took them up to the mountains, they stripped them, they bound them, they took pictures of them, videos, and they tortured them. These girls they did keep the longest. They kept them alive for 48 hours. Actually, they drove the ice pick through their heads and knocked them over the head with hammers. Fortunately, threw them off the mountain. What is so terrifying is that when their skulls were found, they actually still had the ice pick lodged through their head. It was in their skull. The skull was there and the ice pick was still there through their head, which is creepy and disturbing and just unimaginable. Their last victim was Shirley. Now, before Shirley, they were getting very cocky. They thought no one could touch them. The police couldn't catch them. They just thought they were untouchable. They didn't do their normal plan. It was Halloween night, and she was hitchhiking home from a Halloween party, and they changed their pattern. They did not take her up to the mountains. They took her to an abandoned trail just in the woods, an isolated, desolate trail. This time they recorded everything that happened. They recorded the torturing, they recorded the essaying, they recorded all of it. They recorded the whole attack. Bittaker was getting upset with Shirley because she was just quote-unquote lying there. She wasn't giving him what he wanted. She wasn't screaming and crying and begging for her life. So he started hurting her even more. He would kick her and tell her to scream. He wanted her to fulfill his sadistic tendencies. So he said that she eventually got the picture and she would scream and be over the top with her screams, which is just so disturbing, and it's just, I can't imagine how scared that poor little girl was. They used pliers, hammers, and other tools on her and recorded the whole thing. Shirley was their last victim. Again, they used a coat hanger to strangle her, and this time they left her body out in the open. They wanted to hear people talking about them. They wanted to open up the paper and read about it because no one else was found. They weren't finding the other bodies. This time they wanted someone to find the body. They wanted the credit. They didn't just want to see child missing. They wanted the credit in their disgusting crimes. Norris also told one of his other friends from prison about the crimes. Again, they just were in the mindset they would never be caught, so they were being messy. This friend, even though he was a criminal too, he was a registered sex offender, he was in prison for that, he was so terrified after hearing those stories that he did, thank God, contact the police. That friend ended up saving so many more potential victims' lives, which they did have other victims already picked out. Cops ended up tailing Norris and they got him on a drug charge. He had marijuana in his car, so they arrested him for that. They got a search warrant, they searched his house, they found connections to Bittaker, and they ended up tracking Bittaker down. He was in like a hotel, he was in the shower, and they arrested him while he was in the shower. Get to the title of the video, the cassette that they did play, they did end up playing for the jury in court. They got this evidence because Bittaker wiped the entire van clean, but he forgot about that last cassette tape with Shirley. So the police found that, and they had all the evidence that they needed. They never released the video to the public, which they shouldn't. That is terrible. No one needs to hear that. And it was so saddening in the courtroom that people did run out of the courtroom in tears. They broke down in the courtroom. Everybody except for Bittaker, who just sat there. They had like a writing of what was going on in the video, and he was just reading along with a straight face. In the video, you heard the murder. You heard the screaming. You heard her begging for her life. It was incredibly disturbing and sad. Even the lawyer, the prosecutor in that case, he said it changed him. He had to go on antidepressants after that case. The prosecutor said that he would have nightmares of hearing the screams, running to save the girl, but he always gets there too late and sees the ice pick in their head. Which, that is just so sad, and I feel so bad for him that he even had to deep dive into this case more than I did, because I felt really sad after watching it and I felt really disturbed, so I couldn't even imagine the attorneys working on this case. Obviously the poor families of the victims. Lead investigator, police investigator, also killed himself, and in fear of the Bittaker and Norris coming after him, he thought that if he died, it would save the lives of his wife and children, and he was just terrified they were going to come after him. Jury unanimously sentenced them to death in 60 seconds. They both were put to death. Ended up dying in prison before then from cancer and other things. Bittaker was in a lot of pain at the end. He was crying and telling the people interviewing him that now he had a taste of what he did to his victims and how they felt and how he was so sad In 2019, he passed away, Bittaker, and Norris passed away a few years later. Bittaker believes that he became fully human at the end of his life, but FBI agents and psychologists don't buy it. They still think he is a psychopath. He was a psychopath until the day he died. That is all I have for you today, so please let me know what you guys think about this. Share your thoughts in the comment section, and I will respond to you. And thank you guys for watching. And yeah, this was a very sad case. It was very hard to get through. It was very hard to research, and it was very hard to even tell to you guys. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next upload. Bye.